Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the House of Wrestling. This is your host, Zach Mojave, as always, and we are going to be covering straight into the June 24th edition of AEW Dynamite. It is the year 2020. We are still very much into the COVID-19 era of professional wrestling. Limited crowds, limited rosters, wrestlers getting sick left and right, many personal circumstances pervading into the wrestling community and into televised wrestling as we know it today. However, the Wednesday night wars rage on. This June 24th, 2020 episode, emanating from Daly's Place in Jacksonville, Florida, is the go-home show to the now free Fyter Fest pay-per-view. Fyter Fest will be 2 nights, July 1st and July 8th. We have a stacked card for Fyter Fest. I will also be posting a predictions video sometime on either Monday night or Tuesday talking about the card. We have a lot of huge matchups on that card. We have the AEW World Championship match between Jon Moxley and the recently debuted Brian Cage. We have the provisional Night 2 main event between Orange Cassidy and Chris Jericho. We have Cody Rhodes defending the TNT Championship. We have Hikaru Shida and Penelope Ford for the AEW Women's title. A lot of great matchups here. We have, of course, the tag titles between Omega and Paige versus the Best Friends. It's a lot to get excited for. Briefly touching on NXT, we know that this Wednesday as well, NXT will start their 2-night pseudo pay-per-view to run alongside Fyter Fest, the revival of the Great American Bash. Now, that is a personal favorite pay-per-view of mine. Not quite my favorite, but it's definitely one of the ones that I loved back from when I first started watching wrestling in the early 2000s, mid-2000s. I loved Eddie versus JBL. I love the Cena matches, the Big Show matches. We used to get a lot of really great SmackDown content on those Great American Bash pay-per-views. But, of course, we are talking about AEW, and we're going to be focusing on this go-home show here. So first we start out with Wardlow versus Luchasaurus in a lumberjack match. They had been part of some brawls and contention over the last couple of weeks. They had a pull-apart last week. This is really meant to focus on the ongoing tensions between MJF's crew and the Jurassic Express. I know that they're going to be interacting at Fyter Fest, so this lumberjack match is meant to be a really big hype up to that. I like this match overall. I thought this was a really interesting showcase of both Wardlow and Luchasaurus. We haven't seen too much out of either of them as far as their in-ring work before this. I know we've seen plenty of Luchasaurus matches and tag matches with Jurassic Express, but I've never seen quite such a showcase here. There was a big clothesline by Wardlow, and Luchasaurus flip-sold it. I thought that was really cool looking. I really liked how the Lumberjacks operated in this match. I noticed that the face Lumberjacks were doing face stuff, the heel Lumberjacks doing heel stuff. It was really interesting because the face Lumberjacks weren't willing to beat up on Luchasaurus, but the moment the heel Lumberjacks got a chance at him, they started beating the crap out of him. And I also noticed that there was a lot of involvement with the Lumberjacks too. It wasn't just they're there to get beat up on or to roll the guys back in the ring. They were really there to help sell the match, bring intensity back into the dull moments. Everybody got a chance to sell, get a little bit of extra time. It looked really good. And I liked that the heels got to act like heels and the faces acted like faces. There is such a big theme of continuity in AEW that is something you're reminded of every single segment, and it makes it so much more fun to watch if you're an avid wrestling fan, because big things or little things like that can turn into big things. You know, if I see the Best Friends acting like faces in a lumberjack match, or I see Marco Stunt and Jungle Boy trying to defend their guy, in the middle of a lumberjack match, that shows me that these guys are acting like humans. They're not just wrestlers and roles. They're really trying their best to do what they're supposed to be doing within their characters. They're upholding the narrative. Either way, this was just a huge hoss fight, super fun match. As we go close to the finish, they're brawling on the outside and they go towards stage right, tossed into the crowd by Wardlow. Another guy gets tossed off. Wardlow is on the ground, so Luchasaurus, of course, does a shooting star off the stage onto this massive pile of bodies here. I thought that was an incredible spot there. Really, really just blown away by the amount of wrestling acumen that Luchasaurus has. I almost called him Wrestlesaurus. He is quite the wrestler indeed. We go to the finish. MJF distracts Luchasaurus during his pin attempt. Marco Stunt runs through the ring and spears him off. However, this is unfortunately too late. Wardlow sets up the F10. He hits it, gets the win, and then after the match, the whole thing becomes a huge brawl. Like I said, this was an excellent match. I was really surprised by how well these guys could go, but it was just a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. Now, next up, we get Technique by Taz. Taz has been on a roll the last few weeks, and I love these little segments, and I really hope they keep doing Technique by Taz in some way or another, even if he moves on for Brian Cage, because him talking about wrestling has always been a great asset. He wasn't the best on commentary back in the Impact days, but his progression and growth into a manager and a microphone has become exponentially valuable to AEW's consistency in the kayfabe and being a true wrestling show. Him and Excalibur, from people that have been watching Dark and giving me small reports about it, he's been excellent alongside him. They have a great rapport and a great understanding of similar styles, and they were both really well versed technicians. So, Technique by Taz here. Of course, Taz says, "Mox, you're in grave danger when you defend your world title at Fyter Fest." Nice little segment here. Then we get a rundown of the card. We see a quick shot of Britt Baker at the commentary table, or at least by the commentary table in her Rolls-Royce golf cart. We have Rebby or Ruby or Rebel, I still need to get that name right, off to the side there to protect her from the dastardly Tony Schiavone and his lack of patience for Britt's bullshit. We also see Britt has some plexiglass surrounding her, which I thought was absolutely adorable. Seemingly the only plexiglass to be found on this AEW Dynamite episode. We then get a quick commercial before a match with our World Women's Champion, Hikaru Shida, who is 11-1 in the year 2020. She's been on an absolute roll as well. The amount of momentum in some of these stars is quite unheard of, and when we see Hikaru Shida, she has the intensity of a champion. She carries herself like a real athlete. She has the look down. More than anything that I loved in this match, which was quite short, she still has her Tifa Lockhart gear on, which she looks absolutely awesome in, with the long black hair and the, profound biceps. She really does look like Tifa. She is up against Red Velvet here, but that's not going to last particularly long. She had a bit of a standoff with Penelope Ford, so she's trying to get back at her. Penelope had the audacity to slap her before the match. She goes in, hits a Falcon Arrow on Red Velvet, pins her, immediately goes back out there and starts wailing on Penelope. She's kicking her, punching her. She kicks Kip, breaks the sunglasses, and then she storms off. It was like 1-on-3, 1-on-4 between Hikaru Shida and everybody trying to hold her back. Like the segment here. Nice little extra setup just in case you forgot about the women's title match going on at Fyter Fest. It was a really good segment. The match itself wasn't much, but it's not about the match. It's about reminding us of the program. This is the go-home show to a really big set of shows for them, and it was a lot of fun. Next up, Cody versus Jake Hager in a press conference. We get our introductions, and as you can see here on the screen, it's Jake Hager's table completely empty, and Cody's table just filled to the brim. He's got a full-on gang in here, all right? He's got his posse down. We got Arn Anderson, we got Dustin, we got a guy holding the TNT Championship. I love these subtle little heel antics by Cody because he's not quite a bad guy yet, but he really thinks he's hot. God forbid that he lets the TNT Championship just sit on the table. We have to get a guy there who we don't know, who we'll never see again, just to hold it. Brandy Rhodes, Allie, and a stand-in for, I'm assuming, QT Marshall, as he is not going to be on shows for a couple of weeks due to his positive test results for the big COVID. We get some really nice words from Arn. He is always trying to challenge Cody and make him better. He says, I challenged him, I challenged Cody. Jake's not showing up today, disrespecting these people, disrespecting Cody. It shows he's not ready to be a champion. Then we get some questions from the crowd, and it's actual wrestling journalists. I've never, ever in my life have seen this before. We get people that actually work in the wrestling business. PW Insider journalists here. Brian Alvarez said on his radio show that these guys live in Florida, and that makes a lot of sense. It's definitely the safest option, but it's an excellent use of the wrestling world and the greater wrestling community to elevate this segment. Somebody asks Cody, how does it feel to be the first TNT champion? It feels like hope. He then talks about giving Ricky Starks a job. He talks about how he doesn't like play wrestling. He doesn't like cosplay wrestling. He doesn't like meta wrestling. He likes professional wrestling. Cody has to reiterate that the TNT Championship isn't finished because it looks like crap. He talks a little more. Cody's great in these segments. I really could listen to him talk live on a microphone for 10 minutes straight. These commentaries he has about wrestling and the way wrestling feels is so powerful, and it really means a lot to me that he loves wrestling so passionately that he can talk about it like this. Either way, this leads up to Jake coming out. It's just him and his wife. He immediately calls for the photo op. He talks a little bit of nonsense. He doesn't even talk. He talks shit with his facial expressions, which is great because they don't need to force him to talk like they did in WWE. Just let him be himself. Let him do what he's got to do. He's a very scary man with a beard and a wife who is actually quite good at cutting the promos for him. And she does a little heel work here too. After the photo op, she throws some water right in Cody's face and leaves. What a heel! What a heel. We then get a small video package of Sonny Kiss and Joey Janela, the bad boy Joey Janela, and the always star-striking Sonny Kiss. They are driving around. They pick up some snacks at a gas station. They beat the crap out of some ne'er-do-wells and rabble-rousers, and they leave. It is cute. It is awesome. We shall stand. I like these segments, and I'm excited to see more out of both of them, especially Sonny Kiss, as we move into this next match here. Brody Lee and Colt Cabana versus Sonny Kiss and Joey Janela. Brody Lee has been working a notably slower pace than he has been in WWE, and I like that. He is so big and powerful, but he was never as big as some of the more aesthetically or visibly larger wrestlers like a Ryback or a Big Show or a Strowman or even Bray Wyatt for how they were booking him. So he always got treated like a big guy, but not that big of a guy, where here in AEW, they're really taking advantage of how truly massive and powerful he is in these matches. And it showed here a lot with this match against Sonny and Janela. He tags Colt in for a lot of these spots, and we see that he's trying to get Colt to do heel things and to be a true member of the Dark Order, but Colt's still really hesitant. Brody's trying to coach him, and Colt's receptive to the coaching. Before, Colt wouldn't even touch Brody with a 10-foot pole. He wouldn't dare talk to him. Now he's tagging with him, willingly. Sonny goes for a reverse crossface while Joey tries to get going. Sonny does the splits after skidding the cat. Oh, this looked amazing. We go to picture-in-picture, we come back. Janela hits a Death Valley driver on Colt, kick out. Sonny and Joey hit flip dives on the outside. Sonny hits a 450 splash like it's nothing. And then Sonny just starts doing all of these flip moves. He's skidding the cat forward and backwards. He's stepping up off of Brody's hand to get back into the ring. He's diving onto the outside. He's backflipping onto the outside. Crazy stuff. And just as Sonny gets all this momentum going, a huge super kick from Brody Lee to Sonny's face. Brody hits the finishing blow to Joey Janela, but doesn't go for the pin. He just stands over Joey and watches Colt confusedly hurry onto Joey's body and get the pin. Colt is so pleased with himself. He cannot believe that this has happened. And Brody looks smug, pleased, and like he got exactly what he wanted. He is now correctly and effectively indoctrinating Colt into the Dark Order. The storytelling here is excellent. And I really like the idea of Colt being the character they use, who is more of a name, somebody who actually has some value on the roster or in the wrestling community as someone to be ushered into the Dark Order. Before, they were unsuccessfully recruiting jobbers. Now, they're successfully recruiting someone who everybody knows to be this ray of sunshine, this beautiful, beautiful boy in Colt Cabana, into a potentially very evil figure. So, this is great. I loved this. And then we get a quick appearance by Lance Archer. He just comes and picks up the pieces of Brody and Colt's victory, just beating up on Sonny and Joey's lifeless bodies. And we have to then see Jake Roberts worriedly trying to stop Lance Archer. This little development here is also really interesting too. We see that Jake the Snake now has to suffer the consequences of the monster he built. So I hope we see more of that in the coming weeks as well. Then we get a flashback to Shawn Spears on AEW Dark last week. He has a glove. Tully gave him a slug for the glove. Shawn slugged the glove into a slug, so his glove's working. He won the match. I'm not particularly interested in Shawn Spears in general, but it is nice to see that everything is being addressed. The continuity is real. We go to commercial, we come back. SCU versus FTR. A lot of this match was excellent. It definitely was a bit bulky considering it came at a middle point in the show where I would have liked to have seen maybe more out of the Sonny Kiss Janela Cabana Lee match, or maybe more out of Santana and Hardy later on. Even the Orange Cassidy-Chris Jericho segment could have gone just a touch or two longer, where maybe time in this match could have gotten taken out. Overall, though, it was a spectacle. These guys are crashing to the outside a lot, walking and brawling, suplexing, just hitting each other. In the end, we see FTR get the win here. They're cutting a bit of a promo on the roster, basically saying, everybody else is shit. You guys don't know what's happening here. We're calling everybody out. Butcher and Blade, you're next. Lucha Bros, you're next. Jurassic Express, stupid-ass gimmick, you're next. Sonny and Joey, you guys drive around in a car. We're going to drive you into the mat. You're next. Butcher and Blade, again, we don't like you guys. You're next. And of course, the Young Bucks, always making a point to drive in that dream match scenario. Two guys, two groups who have been absolutely tearing it up in wrestling the last 3 or 4 years. We're finally getting them on the same roster, on a crash course to not only aligning for a once-in-a-lifetime match coming up at Fyter Fest, but then splitting apart and having an excellent match sometime down in the future. Butcher and Blade come out in FTR's truck, hurling threats, and the Lucha Bros are right there behind them to get the sneak attack. They get beat up on. Young Bucks come out for the save a little late. So it looks like we have a 4-on-4 on the horizon. It was confirmed later on in the show. We will have the Young Bucks and FTR versus the Lucha Bros and Butcher and the Blade. That should be an excellent match for so many different reasons. 4-on-4 tag matches can be a bit bulky in general. It's hard for everybody to get their spots in, and it's hard to really create a cohesive narrative if the teams don't have a lot of familiarity with each other, but the stakes are quite clear here. FTR is tired of the shit, and Butcher and Blade seem to be the subject of the shit they're tired of right now. And the Young Bucks naturally coming in as the begrudging alliances and teams form, because you can tell that this is obviously leading to Young Bucks versus FTR. That's the end game here. It's just a matter of how much of this build are we going to get? Do they have a bit of will they, won't they, where they're going to gel for a bit? They're like, oh, we seem to work pretty okay. Like, we need to have each other's back. This tag division's quite tumultuous. Maybe we need to work up to a point where the both of us teams get the respect we need. These Omega, Hangman, best friends, bullshit groups, they're getting all the attention. Meanwhile, we're here fighting off all the heels, trying to keep this promotion safe. This is ridiculous. And then maybe they have an alliance before they split up again and they go towards that dream match. There's a lot of options here. And because of how strongly the characters have been defined here in the tag division, it's really getting its own sense of storytelling. It's not just tag wrestling and, shot feuds and bullshit. There's a lot going on here. So I'm really excited to see this story develop. JR, Excalibur, and Tony Schiavone break down the tag championship match at Fyter Fest. It'll be the Best Friends versus Kenny Omega and Hangman Page. And this is a very, very good segment. You can tell that the Best Friends are best friends, and that Kenny Omega and Hangman Page are... It's not that they're not friends. It just seems that they have a quite different way of looking at things. Hangman's a very unwilling character in a lot of these things, but you can tell that he cares about Kenny and he wants to be by his side, and Kenny has become quite disillusioned to a lot of the bullshit going on in the Elite, and they don't feel as connected with the Young Bucks and Cody anymore, but Omega's really invested in trying to keep his friends safe and happy, and that comes across here. The characters are expressed perfectly, and all throughout this show, we see JR, Excalibur, and Tony Schiavone doing amazing work. They have a lot of responsibility to fill time here while several members of the roster are out, especially because Jon Moxley, who has been recently exposed to the virus because of his wife Renee Young's positive test results, he needs to stay home and make sure he doesn't come down with anything. They're planning on bringing him back for night one against Brian Cage, but that remains to be seen as long as he can clear all of the necessary precautions to be on the show. However, we saw Tony Schiavone, Excalibur, and Jim Ross do their due diligence, fill time. They did what they had to do here. And we also see them do what they had to do here talking about this Jon Moxley-Brian Cage match coming up. We get a short promo for it before we lead into the match that Brian has tonight. It's just a big-ass squash. He is curling this guy. He's curling the guy he's jobbing out and then tossing him over his head. He hits his moves. He beats him up. Taz comes out. This is where we're supposed to be paying attention the most. The Taz promo. This is the best part of every Brian Cage match. It's the Taz promo. He says, look, we can't find Mox anywhere. We can't find him anywhere. Oh, there he is. So Taz's promo boils down more or less to Brian came to work and John didn't. Brian Cage is better and John isn't. We actually got quite an interesting quote from Taz. He came to work. He came to work, and you're sitting at home with some bullshit excuse. For all the right reasons that you're not here, you're right. Because this, pointing to Brian, is not safe. I did like the promo, because it's heel Taz at his finest. I don't know how I feel about him so directly calling coronavirus exposure a bullshit excuse. Because while it's not the best wording. It's a great way to get heat. And I noticed people didn't like it and had a vitriol reaction to it. And that's a great thing because it's not explicitly offensive, but it gets the people going. It's very akin to, saying something about a sports team people don't want you to make fun of because they lose a lot in that home city, or blah, 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 or talking about a rival team. But with the added stakes of we're in the middle of a pandemic, so this might not be quite the line you want to go for, but it still landed. It wasn't a lot of pushback from people that didn't like it. So I don't have the biggest problem with it. I get it. He's a heel. He's got to cut a heel promo. He has to make us boo. So if anything, it probably helped because the people that love these Taz promos and are maybe rooting for Brian Cage here, they got dialed back a bit. They said, no, Taz is a heel. He says heel things. We need you to boo him. Let's have him talk about coronavirus a little bit. Get people back on Moxley's side. So this was good insurance. We go to commercial. We come back. We see Brody Lee and Colt Cabana, and Brody is so excited to finally get Colt Cabana a win. He says, look at you. You got to win on Dynamite. This is what you wanted. And Brody takes the opportunity and the momentum to challenge SCU at Fyter Fest. It's going to be him and his best men, which now includes Colt, I assume, versus whatever combination of SCU they have to offer. This is going to be an exciting match because we already know SCU can provide in the ring. We know Brody Lee is this underrated superstar caliber wrestler. And now we got Colt Cabana in the mix. This could be the turn. Maybe not the full turn, but this next interaction, this next big tag with Brody, has a lot of implications for Colt Cabana's character going forward. Then we get another big rundown of the Fyter Fest card. We're crash coursing in. We then see the commentary table again, and Britt Baker has just handed Rebel a note to Tony Schiavone, and Tony tells us that this note is addressed to Big Swole, the swollest character in AEW. Britt writes, I may have been in a dumpster for 9 to 10.5 hours, but you're still the biggest piece of trash I've ever met. I will have my big revenge soon enough. Swole comes out and is very upset. She is trying to find a way to break through this impenetrable seal of plexiglass, only protecting Britt from the outside, I imagine, and not protecting the outside from Britt's shrill. Britt says, go steal someone else's star power. Big Swole then grabs a big garbage can, climbs over the Rolls Royce, and dumps it into the plexiglass enclosure, coating Britt with paper and debris, and sticking her into this plexiglass enclosure. Quite the poetry to describe any recent use of plexiglass in the wrestling industry. I loved this. This was a really fun little thing. So our last match of the night. Santana with Ortiz versus the Damascus Matt Hardy. Of course, Santana is replacing the recently suspended Sammy Guevara. Sammy was suspended without pay by AEW for inappropriate comments he made about a WWE female performer on a podcast a few years ago. Obviously, this is part of the bigger discussion of hashtag speaking out, but to get into that a bit would be doing a disservice to it, so we'll move on to the match. Starts out a bit slow. Matt loves to work a very intent-laden pace, and I love that about him. He really does a good job of building the momentum up. You see him start out with rest holds and headlocks, moving around the ring, trying to find his footing, and by the time he brings it back inside in these types of matches, we're working a harder-hitting, faster, more move-heavy pace. There's moves getting hit, not just brawling and walking. I thought this match was good overall. These are two guys who have worked in the business for a very long time. Santana and, of course, Ortiz, part of LAX. Years of amazing work on Impact. And Matt Hardy, who everybody knows and loves, one of the greatest of all time in the wrestling business. Side effect after side effect Matt's hitting here. Santana kicks out of 3 side effects. Really looking this man look strong. Ortiz is yelling the whole time, he wants your food. He wants your food. I don't know exactly what this is supposed to mean, but it really does sound like some New York shit, so it's perfect. I love it. And after that, he gets the pin. Damascus stands as the victor on this June Wednesday night. Ortiz and Santana both aren't happy about this as they start to beat him down, and Private Party come in to try and get the save. And we get to see basically every key figure of the Inner Circle that is on the show and available to us on the show. We saw Jake, we're going to see Chris later, we saw LAX. This is it. This is everybody who's a main player on this team. That's great continuity. This is the type of stuff I'm talking about, you know? You want to keep these figures fresh in people's minds, you have to keep them fresh in people's minds. Now let's move on to the main event. Not quite a press conference, and this will be live, but a confrontation between Orange Cassidy, freshly squeezed, and Le Champion Chris Jericho. I love that Chris has not been the champion for such a long time, but he is Le Champion, and he will always be Le Champion. Both men come out alone, and nobody will be interfering throughout the entirety of this segment. So I'm going to try and read this with as many quotes as I can, because there are great lines here. Chris doing all the talking, of course. Why did the chicken cross the road? To get to the other side. But why did the chicken cross the road to get to the other side? He talks about always hearing this joke and wondering what it means. And then he says that Orange Cassidy helped him realize what it meant. Because Orange Cassidy is, why did the chicken cross the road? He's that joke in wrestling. Because he's stupid, he's played out, and Jericho gets more and more sick of him and his act. Doesn't even call it a gimmick, calls it an act every time he sees him. He begged Tony Khan, he begged Cody, he begged Kenny Omegas and the Young Bucks for an explanation of his signing. They said, well, people love him, and the crowd cheers, because we all love Orange Cassidy. Chris commends Orange, not just for getting over, but for getting over by himself, and for being himself. And to be fair to Chris, and to be fair to the reality of this promo, that is absolutely true. It should be said time and time again how truly incredible it is that Orange, purely by just doing the gimmick, making the work speak for itself, and by then performing excellently in his wrestling roles, when he actually gets into the ring to work a match, he got himself over entirely by himself. And that's magical. You don't see that anymore in wrestling. But Chris's commendations are only half-hearted and backhanded. He says that Orange, you're just like the fans. You're lazy, you're entitled, you're trash. He says, if you do any of that bullshit kicking my shin nonsense, I'm going to knock your teeth down your throat and kick your ass in 30 seconds. Orange grabs the mic, puts it down, and starts kicking those shins. Jericho then breaks Orange's glasses. JR commenting, well, he's got a warranty on those Ray-Bans. And just like that, hell has been unleashed. They have a huge brawl onto the outside. Orange throwing Jericho into barricades. Jericho cracking the side of Orange's head open with a camera. Orange finishes this brawl off by hitting a huge Superman punch to Chris Jericho. Sends him flying backwards and through a table. Orange, blood on his hands and his shirt. A shirt that has his very face on it. And a clenched fist in front of him. Stands tall over Le Champion. And we fade to black. Night 1 of Fyter Fest is coming up on TNT, and it's free, and it's next week. This was an awesome show. I have no idea how the ratings were so lopsided towards NXT, because I caught glimpses of NXT, and it wasn't a bad show, but the build to Great American Bash and the build to Fyter Fest are just so different. Fyter Fest has so much more energy, stakes, build. It's not just a reaction counter-programming thing. It's their pay-per-view. It's something that they wanted to have this time of year anyway, and now is being formatted for the audience at home who is begging and pleading for really premium wrestling content. And AEW absolutely responded in the best way they could and said, you know what? We're going to give you your pay-per-view. We're going to give you all the fixins. Just make sure you tune in the same time as last week. And it reflected so heavily on this show because none of this felt like a last-minute adjustment. It felt like this was the natural conclusion. All of these feuds are exciting. All the title matches have meaning to it besides the championships. They have that little extra sprinkle of personal vendetta, of grudge, of grit. I'm giving this show a 9 out of 10. There was something extra special about this episode because it wasn't just the wrestling and the spots and the jokes themselves. I felt what really pushed this episode the most was the stories and the writing and what's going on another level in this program. There's so much power to the continuity that AEW provides on their programs that this is what we as wrestling fans talk about as our problems with other promotions. I don't want to be WWE versus AEW because Ring of Honor had these problems in the late 2010s and Impact had these problems for over a decade and WCW had these problems before they were ever a WWE entity. We don't see guys trying their best to write cohesive stories, not just one at the main event angle, but several at angles that engage different portions of your audiences. For me, the most favorite parts of the show for me are still Orange Cassidy, it's still Sonny Kiss and Joey Janela, it's still Hikaru Shida. But everything else going on in the show is so amazing that I still care about it. But as a fan of those people, I'm being fully served my full course meal of all these great programs, all this great wrestling. So for me, I understand that maybe AEW didn't have the star power that NXT had this week, but this show was excellent. All right, that's it for our show this week. I didn't post for a week or so, mostly because I've been working on other NBA content or trying my best to see how this new format's going to get recorded. Also, tell me how the mic quality is if you are listening throughout the whole show, because this is a new microphone, and I'm excited about that. You can follow me on Twitter or Instagram or on this YouTube channel through the description box. Like, subscribe, comment, all the stuff that everybody else says. I'm Zach Mahabir. This was the House of Wrestling. I will see you guys next week.